This president has a particular venom, that's the quote, for people of color, according to the latest person of color caught in his web of racist attacks, Al Sharpton. But the most blistering response to President Trump's infestation conflagration comes from the Baltimore Sun's editorial board. Have you seen this? Here's one of the main parts. We would tell the most dishonest man to ever occupy the Oval Office, he's still not fooling most Americans into believing he's even slightly competent in his current post, or that he possesses a scintilla of integrity. Better to have some vermin living in your neighborhood than to be one. I have never heard anything like that from an editorial board. The Baltimore Sun is a long and storied publication. So what does it mean? Where are we? What is to be done about it? Let's hear from one of the people who wants to lead us as president. We spoke a short time ago with Mayor Pete Buttigieg here in Detroit. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me on.
So, big night, big moment in the country also. So the debates will be tomorrow and Wednesday, but we are living something right now. This editorial from the Baltimore Sun, I've never seen language like that from an editorial board about any major politician, let alone a sitting president. How do you see where we are right now?
Well, it's a consequence of the president attacking his political critics by attacking an American city. And so you got a newspaper standing up for their city. Baltimore is a proud city. We're all proud of our cities. And, the president is continuing to go down this road of being the divider in chief, right?
Do you see it that way? As in terms of everything right now, two sides, right? People will say, well, isn't he right? Isn't Baltimore one of the 10 toughest places to live? Doesn't it have a lot of problems?
Like he is the president of the United States. Baltimore is in the United States. He's the president for the people of Baltimore, and he's talking about it like it's somebody else's problem. The question should be, if Baltimore faces challenges, which it does, as every major American city does, what is he doing to help? And, what we see is a president whose response is to attack fellow Americans, whether it's members of Congress who've been critical of him, or an entire city full of Americans just because that city is partly represented by a member of Congress who's critical of him. And it continues down this path of dividing Americans, black versus white, rural versus urban, which is exactly why America is becoming weaker as a country under this president each passing day.
You believe that America is weaker because of this president?
Of course.
Seen how?
Well, first of all, our reputation is collapsing around the world, but also our confidence in our own country is collapsing. And the president needs to be able to bring people together. Look, even when we're divided out of disagreement over a policy, the president is supposed to stand, the presidency is supposed to stand as a symbol of something that we all have in common. And yet this president has taken every single opportunity to turn us against one another. This is why, there's a lot of talk over exactly how far the extent of Russian interference went. We spend far too little time talking about why. Why did a very sophisticated adversary of the United States calculate that the best way they could undermine our country was to get a guy like this elected? And it was because they knew, correctly, anticipated, that America would become weaker and more divided under his presidency.
Do you believe he's using words specifically, saying infested so often when dealing with things that have a racial component? Do you think that is intentional?
Well, there's no question. I mean, look at the pattern, right? This is a kind of terminology that he reserves for places and situations where there are a lot of minorities involved. And, we can debate over how strategic it is, how intentional it is, but on its face, it is racist.
So you articulate the message well. You see the problem. When we look at the polls that came out today from Quinnipiac, or pretty consistently, you struggle with African Americans, literally defined almost as 0%. Why?
Well, African-American voters are tired of having been lied to or taken for granted by politicians. And so when you are new on the scene, when you haven't been known for years or decades, and when you're not yourself from a community of color, you've got a lot of extra work to do in order to validate what you have to say and earn that trust. I've been able to do it before, and I'm going to do it this time, partly by explaining what I propose to do. The most comprehensive plan in the 2020
The Douglas
field.
plan after Frederick Douglass.
Exactly. It is about tackling battling systemic racism in every aspect of American life and doing it with intention. From everything from making sure we invest in minority entrepreneurship to investing in dealing with health inequities, like the inequity that has black women 3 times as likely to die in childbirth as white women. It's looking at employment, it's looking at housing, it's looking at economic empowerment as well as criminal justice and democracy. But it's not just the policy piece, it's also the outreach. It's the actual work of reaching out to voters where they are and recognizing that, the black vote is not monolithic. In order to deserve to win, I need to reach out to lots of different groups of voters, including lots of different groups of black voters, and that's exactly what we're going to do.
What is your understanding of your experience at home with the African American community and why there's a difference in support and why there has been criticism of your reaction in moments of crisis?
Well, it's a journey, and it's a difficult one. Look, any urban mayor of a diverse city, and especially a diverse city like ours, has to confront some of the most searing and difficult challenges that cities and communities face. And as somebody who is responsible for a community that is 25% black and responsible for the safety and well-being of these residents, and is also responsible for a police department, that means that the wall of mistrust between law enforcement and communities of color and black residents in particular is one that I've got to try to bring people together around, and it's never going to be perfect, but we've made progress and we're making more progress now. We're living right now in the wake of an officer-involved shooting. Eric Logan, a black man killed by a white officer, and I've requested, and we now have, an independent prosecutor to review what happened. The officer said he was attacked with a knife, but the body camera wasn't on. But we're not waiting for that information to come back to take steps together as a community. We're going to come together and review the body camera policy. We're working together on
It's got to be on all the time. We see this problem again and again and again. They all have to have body cameras. They all have to be on. I've been following this for a decade. I know the arguments on both sides. It is the only remedy. It's better for the police. It's better for the community. Everybody's got a camera.
Well,
it's
that's one
on.
of those things that sounds good until you're taking evidence from a child or entering a sexual assault scene, and you're creating footage that by law has to be handed over to anybody who asks for it. That's why these things aren't as simple as they seem on their face. But what we're doing in South Bend is,
I think that you can over-sophisticate it. And
yeah,
not you
and that's why in
personally,
South
but that
Bend we
argument
just procured a technology that will automatically turn it on anytime a gun is removed from a holster, for example. So we'll continue working.
Right. I just think that the more
solutions,
transparency, at the end of the day, it works. I know there's sensitive situations.
Understand, anybody who says there's a simple answer is wrong.
Transparency is the simple answer. How you get transparency.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And another thing we've done is, and I don't think a city our size in the Midwest has done it the way we have, but we've started publishing, and this was before this last incident, publishing incident level data so people knew how many times there was a use of force and what was going on. Now we're looking at how we can make that even more transparent.
Good.
But there's no question that that trust building has to happen.
People feel that there's something going on they're not being told.
Right.
And that hurts the perception of officers when it's unwarranted, and the confidence in the community. So one more step on this. Obviously, white politicians find a way to connect with African American communities. I thought you would get some respect when you said, I couldn't get it done having more black cops on. Couldn't get it done. I tried.
Well, we have. As I've been speaking to black audiences, a lot of people tell me they appreciate that I was candid about the work that we still have to go on.
Because people usually never shoulder any blame. What is the lesson you've learned to this point in the campaign?
When it comes to
your appeal and why you're not getting more traction?
Well, again, that you have to have serious plans and you have to have quantity time. You know, it took me years of work in South Bend of people understanding not only where my heart was, but what my work was going to be for my black support to go up, as it did, between my first election and my second in the primary. But this time, I don't have years. I've got months. And so it's going to be my job to communicate what we're going to do about gaps in education, what we're going to do to make sure black entrepreneurs have a chance to thrive, how we're going to go about reducing incarceration in this country by 50%. That's my job to go out and sell it, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to continue to communicate about that.
You know, the mayor's got an interesting plus-minus, right, which is his age. He's in his mid-30s, 37. So he's right. He doesn't have a lot of time in this campaign. He also hasn't had a lot of time to develop his record, right? And that's something that will play out for better and worse on the stage. And he's also right about African Americans. You can't just look at that voting group as a monolith, especially when it comes to policy. They tend to favor moderate policies. That's not what the mayor is pitching. So how will he connect tomorrow night? We're going to test the mayor on that next. Our special pre-debate coverage continues from Motown. Mayor Pete Buttigieg is a smart guy. I mean, objectively, he is. He's also stuck in the polls, objectively. He got a pop from the rest of the field, but since he hasn't grown in the last couple of months. So how does he explain his wrestling with residents? Is he ready for the attacks that are likely to come his way tomorrow night? Here's what he told us a short time ago. Everybody who gives an appraisal of your performance when you're doing these things, you check all the obvious boxes of being smart, articulate, you have an interesting background, you're young, which cuts both ways. Now that we see what we're living, this is going to be an identity politics election. I'm not saying it should be. Yep. I'm saying it will be. And when you're on that stage tomorrow night, how do you communicate to people that I can take the most fearsome politician in a generation on toe-to-toe, and what he does to other people, he will not do to me. I can beat this president.
I'm not scared of this president. I mean, this is a guy who was working on season 7 of Celebrity Apprentice when I was driving armored vehicles outside the wire in Afghanistan. I'm not afraid to take him on. The question is, how do we take him on in a way that doesn't just empower him? You know, the gift of this president is to take any energy that goes his way, even if it's in the form of criticism, and turn it into a kind of food that he just grows off of and gets bigger. That's the code that we've got to crack. And I think the way to do it is to name and confront everything that he does wrong, but then immediately go back to talking about the impact that we will have on voters' lives. If we're talking about him, that means we're not talking about you. If we're talking about your everyday life, that's what gives different voters a stake in this election, and also, by the way, unifies voters who have been divided by this White House's masterful practice of white identity politics.
But this is how he won. And, you know, the trick of it is, you know, you have political correctness and then you have perfect candor, okay? And that's what he's playing too, which is this talk of his. It's not that his supporters are deplorable. You've been traveling this country. You know the disaffection is real. You know the pain is real, and that there are a lot of white Americans who feel forgotten by what others celebrate as diversity and multiculturalism. They see him as a proxy, a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant proxy.
Yeah, but he's playing them for suckers. I mean, he's the message that he's telling to these Americans is, yeah, you're not making enough money. Yeah, your houses or housing is becoming unaffordable. College education is out of reach for your kids, and your job may be automated away in 10 years. But your big problem in life is political correctness. That's what he's trying to get people to believe. And sure, a lot of people voted this way last time around because they had been so let down by people on both sides of the political spectrum that they decided to just vote to burn the house down because they felt disaffected or because they didn't like our nominee. And this isn't to excuse the racism or the misogyny or the xenophobia in that campaign. But we should look at why those things found more fertile ground than usual without excusing it. And I think what we've got to now say to these voters is, okay, you voted to burn the house down. Now the house is on fire. But he has not done one thing to make your life better. And if you think your problem is brown people, when your job is about to get automated away and you don't have the retirement savings you need in order to actually have a dignified remainder of your life, then you're not going to make it.
You'll say I gave you the best economy ever, and I'm finally speaking the truth.
Yeah, the best economy ever. I mean, under Obama, unemployment goes, what, from 10 to 5? Trump sees it go from 5 to 4, and he thinks he's the one who, it's like the rooster in the morning, thinks he made the sun come up. Meanwhile, there's the very simple fact that while GDP is going up, life expectancy is going down. So yeah, the Dow's up, there's some nice economic numbers, fantastic. 90% of Americans have not seen their incomes budge more than the slightest amount the entire time that I have been alive. This president, I mean, this is a problem that goes back before this president, but he has done nothing. Look, he and his ally, Mitch McConnell in the Senate, are killing the minimum wage bill that was passed out of the House. They're killing every serious effort that has come about.
They say the minimum wage winds up actually reducing wage rolls because people are going to lose their jobs to make up for the mandate.
Yeah, they say that as if it's a theoretical question, as if we didn't have decades worth of data showing that that's not true. This is what we're learning in this moment, is that Reagan conservatism, economically, is just like communism. Sounds good in theory, but we tried it and it failed in practice.
Tomorrow night, there's a good chance you're going to have to show you can take a punch. We've heard that Beto O'Rourke and there's some others now see you as a target. You know, in this recent polling, it's very interesting to see how Biden recovered since that last set of numbers after the first debate. You are in that same place, 5 to 7%. You got there quickly, and surprisingly to people, you've stayed there. Now you're a target. How are you going to take a punch tomorrow night? Someone comes at you and starts talking about your age and inexperience. That's the first one. How do you take that punch?
Look, I'm going to talk about why I'm the best person to be the nominee and to be the president. And folks can poke holes. It's what they do. That's part of what a debate is for. I welcome it. You know, this is an opportunity for many Americans, many of whom, by the way, have not been following the blow-by-blow of the process the way folks like you and I have, to take our measure, to see what we're made of, and what they're going to see is a different message and a different kind of messenger. I'm just not like the others, and I think that's going to come across tomorrow night.
Do you have vulnerability digging into your past employment for Baker McKenzie? What you were doing over there for them, the contractor?
No, I did good work. I never worked on anything I didn't believe in my private sector career. I also figured out pretty quickly that my heart was in public service, and after 2 or 3 years in business, I decided to commit myself to public service. It was definitely a pay cut. It was definitely a life change, but it's a good one. And my military service and my public service has really shaped me, and it shapes the heart that I bring to this presidential campaign.
As I always say to people when they come on the show in your position, one, I rarely get to say this, but thank you for your service to the country. And two, I wish you good luck, because everybody's got to agree that we need better in terms of our dialogue and our relationship with politics and the people than we're getting right now.
Now's
so
our
good luck
chance.
to you tomorrow night.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Mayor, appreciate it.
Pleasure.